absolute favorite restaurant. And well, Restaurant X, of course, got their feelings hurt because I was saying I was going to be there, but in 2 weeks you could come see me at my favorite restaurant. And I learned I can't say things like that. So I will just mention Heritage Action for America. Look, I love Heritage Action for America. I love all of our sponsors. But I have long-time personal friends with several of the guys who run Heritage Action for America. I know them personally. They are friends of mine. In fact, more often than not, they are the people who send me emails saying, you sounded a little squishy today on issue X, Y, or Z. Now, Mike Needham is the president of Heritage Action, and they've got Tim Chapman and Russ Vogt, and they're all good friends of mine. But they really, I think, if they're honest about it, they are the puppets whose strings get pulled by someone else who really runs the ship behind the scenes and makes sure their trains are running on time and cracks the whip. How many of you are involved with Heritage Action for America? Not enough. They're changing the shape of the country. It is interesting to me, like with Freedom Works and the Madison Project and the Senate Conservatives Fund, how much ink is spilled in Washington by Republicans to lament groups like Heritage Action. And there's a reason why. Because it used to be really easy for Republicans to go home to their district and say conservative things, and no one knew better. And then there's this thing Al Gore invented called the internet, where you could go in between bouts of global warming and check what they're actually doing. And Heritage developed a scorecard, and their scorecard is the standard bearer. It is the gold standard for which members of Congress are or are not conservative. Now, there are other groups out there that have scorecards, and they're all great, except for a few. But if you want to find out who is and is not a conservative, really a conservative, not a Republican, but a conservative, and there is a difference, you go to Heritage Action for America. If you want to be involved in the ground game, there are a number of groups you can get involved with, and one of them, again, I'm dear friends with them. I can vouch for them, and I'm delighted to give you not technically the head of the organization, but the real, power in the organization. Jessica Anderson of Heritage Action.
I don't look that scary, do I? He makes us sound like we're this ominous Oz behind the curtain. Well, it's great to be here. I'm excited to see so many RedStaters that we've been working with over the last few years. And one RedStater is also a Sentinel, and she's with us here today. Ginny Qualia was one of our first Sentinels. Yep. She is famous in her own right, and she was gracious enough to join us this weekend and has been with us over the last few years. And we put together a short video that I'd like to start us off with today by watching that. So, guys in the back.
I just felt crippled with fear and inaction, and I remember every morning I'd fall to my knees in prayer next to the bed, asking God, what can I do to make this better? How can I be part of the solution, not part of the problem? 5 years ago, when my husband and I retired, we had this long-range plan when we first got married to retire after 30 years of work. And it was the McCain-Obama campaign in 08. And I could see that the political winds were favoring Obama, and that was a scary thing. And we had a market crash. And so half of the things that we had saved on paper were now wiped out. So I started to venture over to my local GOP in hopes of finding something to do for the election. And there was really nothing going on there. It was very disheartening. I was just looking for some way to make a difference and do something. Well, I've been a longtime member of the Heritage Foundation. So I was personally contacted by Russ Vogt and Jessica Anderson when Heritage Action was just starting up. and they were looking for activists to write letters to the editor on the Affordable Health Care Act. So I said that I would, and they provided me some wonderful research and talking points to help me craft my letter. I submitted the letter, it was published, and our relationship grew from there. They do the same with each Sentinel. It's a very personal relationship they develop with Sentinels, and that's what separates them from all the other organizations out there that I've tested. There's all these tools in an activist tool chest, and Heritage Action is there to teach activists how to use those tools. Now I look forward to the future because I know that I'm making a difference. As a Sentinel, we have our voices heard individually. And when you add up our team with all the other teams that are growing across this country as Sentinels, we're going to be a force to be reckoned with, and we will be heard in DC and help shape policy and help take our country back to its founding principles.
For too long, conservatives have been silenced, watching the progressive elite push their agenda on us. Americans who believe in our Constitution, believe that it is for the people and by the people, and we want to see this handed down to our next generation. The good news is conservatives all across America, like Ginny in this video today, are no longer silent, and it's causing Washington to be pulled up from its bootstraps and thrown into the middle of a systematic cultural change. My name is Jessica Anderson, Grassroots Director for Heritage Action. I'm not Mike Needham. I'm better looking than Mike Needham, and I'm glad that I'm here with you today to talk through what we are doing at the front row of the grassroots, and friends, let me tell you, that is not in Washington, D.C. Heritage Action has worked hand in hand with RedState since our creation in 2011. Eric Erickson was really our first activist ever. We joke about it because we basically had to create this entire program around his awesomeness. So it's great to be among friends and with Eric this weekend. And through this close-knit relationship, we have learned so much from each of you in this room as we've worked diligently every day to bring Congress back to its humble beginnings. This is what the framers intended, for a government for the people and by the people. And in this way, Washington is beginning to change, and it's beginning to listen because of our combined work. Many will tell you that Congress is broken. I believe that Congress is not broken, it works just fine, it just hasn't been working for us. It's been dominated by special interest groups that exist to line their pockets and fill their bellies with the pork of big government, and they just sit back and let that cycle go. That, my friends, is what I'm here to change, and I guarantee you that everyone in this room is here to change that as well. As we saw in the video, Ginny is part of a team of activists that have, in a sense, revolutionized the relationship between Washington and hardworking Americans. These are people who became sick of throwing their throwing their remotes at the TV, televisions out the window, and feeling powerless as every principle they held dear was being taken away by the big government machine. They asked themselves, where should I start? How do I get anyone to listen? How do I find the time to learn all the details to really make my voice heard? What difference can one person truly make? Ginny is one of thousands who have asked these questions over and over until their voices got louder and louder and they realized they weren't alone. A nationwide team of activists was ready to hit the ground running. The Heritage Action grassroots model is only as strong as the conservative warriors that comprise it, and we call them Sentinels. Sentinel means to stand guard, and we are standing guard for freedom. Sentinel exists to partner with you as an activist in your fight to hold Congress accountable. Whether you're already involved in another organization, the Tea Party, or a lone ranger on that street corner, we want to partner with you to take meaningful action and provide the resources that you just can't get anywhere else. This model, the decentralization of control, the empowerment of the people, it differs quite a bit from the nexus of give, take, and surrender that DC has thus far made us follow. Under the old DC paradigm, an issue would pop to the forefront and things would go something like this. Tell me if this sounds familiar. An overreaching president decides we need a national, one-size-fits-all solution that only he can give us. Thousands of pages of regulations are drafted, which no one reads. Nancy Pelosi tells us we better make them law so we can find out what they say. And then almost immediately, that day, someone in the Republican establishment decides it's going to be too hard to fight back, so they simply roll over. Joe Biden then makes a statement that no one can quite understand. A squadron of lobbyists descends on Capitol Hill, seeing to it that the new legislation makes plenty of room for the corporate powerhouses that they represent. The president then goes surfing in Hawaii to unload some of this stress that comes with fixing the country all by himself. And America wakes up to find her country a little less free than it was when we went to bed. The Sentinel model reminds us that there is another way. Sentinels are the vanguards of accountability. Sentinels like Ginny, like Heather Cordasco, or Kevin Kukaji, all here this weekend. They know the issues. They know more about a specific policy position than even their member of Congress does. A great example of this is when we were at a town hall earlier this year in New Jersey. Sentinel Nancy Masai asked her member, who will go unnamed, but it's New Jersey, so yeah. She asked him his position on OPEC. And he stated, well, I don't really know enough about this issue to offer an opinion. Nancy was perplexed, and then she responded and said, well, sir, you voted on OPEC 2 days ago. Another Sentinel happened to be in the room, a guy by the name of Hugh Gilmartin, and he jumped in to explain OPEC and why this representative should have voted against it. And this isn't a joke. This is the reality that we are in. Sentinels are pushing Congress to know more because now we know more. We know more than their members of Congress, and a lot of times, we know more than their staffers. Sentinels are growing. We are growing our numbers and our influence daily, interrupting the status quo of a fragmented GOP state party structure, taking over local school boards, county commissioner seats, and Sentinels are growing their network and provide support for the Sentinel team from their place of worship, their office, their neighborhood, and their larger community. And finally, Sentinels are going. They go out and lead. As Ginny explained, she wanted to do something to make sure her voice was heard and demand change from Congress. Her first step was simple, a letter to the editor. Who's written a letter to the editor? Almost all of us. In the 4 years I've known Ginny, she went from writing a letter to the editor to now giving speeches to hundreds in a formal conference room like we're in today, to being on the docks in Wilmington, North Carolina, shouting for liberty, shouting for freedom. I've seen her tackle her representatives' total disregard for the Constitution from a press podium, a town hall, and over the waves of social media. She is a Twitter queen. You all should follow her if you aren't following her already. And going doesn't mean waiting for activism to come to your front door. It means signing a petition, getting out there, walking the streets, and you are the one holding the petition. Sentinels and activists, like everyone in this room, have been doing it all along. And Washington, it's beginning to listen. We are sending the message to DC elites, and we are seeing the beginnings of a cultural change in Washington due in no small part to the hard work of you in this room. This change is not something that comes overnight. It's not something that happens every 2-4 years. It requires the long, haul. And I believe that you're here this weekend because you see the long haul and you see that Washington is beginning to change. The political ruling class is starting to learn that shortcuts and backroom deals cannot take the place of an authentic policy debate with the American people. And we are seeing this debate play out across the board. Let me give you some examples. As Senator DeMint earlier spoke on, let's look at the Export-Import Bank. For 80 years, this piggy bank for corporate giants has grown in resources and power. They make taxpayer-backed loans to billionaire conglomerates, fend off endless changes from the liberal press, mind you, of favoritism and corruption, and continue to wheel and deal as if no one is watching. Everyone in DC has treated the bank as part of the inevitable status quo. As I stand here today, the bank is merely weeks from being expired. That is amazing, and the power brokers in Washington are no longer able to gamble with taxpayer dollars. Under this new DC paradigm, defenders of corporate welfare have nowhere left to hide. We have overturned every rock and closed the door to corporate moneybaggers. Second, on the immigration front, the Democrats have spent decades eroding the rule of law. Many Republicans, some of which we will hear from this weekend, have been stalwart in fighting back, refusing to implement the Senate's Gang of Eight amnesty package. But that has not stopped the president from starting his own amnesty program. 2 years ago, he began the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals Initiative. Heard of it? Yep. Under the reign of DACA, Border Patrol agents are instructed to ignore current law and refrain from prosecuting certain illegal entries. This program has acted as a de facto incentive program for citizens of foreign countries to enter here unlawfully, resulting in the anticipated 90,000 illegal crossings this year alone. So what exactly happened last week? Well, the grassroots got wind of this program. They heard the president ask for billions of dollars in emergency funding to control the border crisis that his policies created really in the first place. Sentinels mobilized, they charged their members' offices, activists took to the phone calls, to letters, they brought cookies into their staff assistants to help sweeten the deal, and as a result, awareness of DACA spread throughout the House. And last week, the GOP passed a bill for a permanent freeze on the president's lawless amnesty initiative. And this list goes on. Congress is beginning to listen to its constituents because we're not simply demanding change, we're going in and we're taking back the reins. That's right. We must stop simply asking how much the next highway program is going to cost. Instead, we're working to revolutionize the system. We're returning this back to the power of the states through the Transportation Empowerment Act. We must stop simply trying to tweak and be okay with the left's amnesty deals. We can shoot down these violations of law whenever they appear, like freezing DACA. This is what we're aiming for, and conservatives, Sentinels, and RedStaters, we're up to our eyeballs in this. This is the real opportunity to start calling the shots if we continue to do the right things in the coming months. It's time to go on offense. I'm tired of playing defense. It's time to go on offense. It's time to continue to change Washington. I'm 27 years old, the wife of an Army soldier, and the mother of a baby of one, who I left this time for the first time today, right? I'm tired of people 50 years older than me who are making these decisions for me. I'm part of this change, and I know you're in this room because you too believe that you're part of this change. So let's grab our bootstraps, head back out there, and continue to work together to fight for an America which embodies the opportunity for all and preference for none. Thank you.
We're happy to take a couple of questions if anybody has any questions. All right. Well, listen, no, you're not allowed to leave yet. I'm going to make the pitch again, and I'll do this with all the sponsors who come up and speak on stage. I know the group. I love the group. You need to get involved with the group. They actually make a difference. They do. We've got time for one question right here if you want to go to.
I'm not quite 50 years older than you, and I'm certainly not one making the decisions that impact your life. I read over this document. It's excellent. Question is, what are you doing on college campuses? Because this needs to happen there too.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that question because that's where my activism started. I was in a college campus at University of Florida, go Gators, and yep, I like that. And my professor of history was basically telling me that it was a whole mess, but everything she was saying was wrong. So I raised my hand, said I disagreed with her, and I felt like we should have a system of meritocracy, that people should rise and fall based on their merit. And she asked me to leave. She asked me to leave her class, and that was the decision at 20 years old that I would get involved. And I started on the college campus. When at Heritage Action now, we actively recruit sentinels from colleges, and we actually go a step further and try to get them younger when they're still idealists and they're 17, 18 years old. Our youngest sentinel is a guy by the name of Alex Cohen out of St. Louis, and he gets his group together after high school. And so the principles that we care about are incredibly applicable to people of my generation, and even though the liberal press would like you to believe we're not listening, we're the largest debt-paying generation. And that means when we're getting a job, we're paying more taxes, we're having to pay into a healthcare system we didn't choose. And so getting Sentinel and equipping these young conservatives with resources and the skills to communicate, to debate, to fight back against their liberal professors really helps make a difference for that. So I love that question. Thank you, sir. Okay.
Yeah, we'll take one more. One more question.
I have a question. This doesn't have to do with that, but it has to do with partly with college campuses and the Second Amendment. There's a girl who's going to Dartmouth who's going to have to leave because she has been stalked by this man, and they won't let her carry a gun to protect herself, and she actually has to leave Dartmouth in order for her own safety, and they will not help her 1 ounce. Now, as far as the liberalism on college campuses, that's an absolute disaster. Maybe we should have conservative universities. But how do you feel about this poor girl and others like her who have to defend the Second Amendment and actually leave a college because they won't even help her?
Yeah, thank you for that question. You know, I'm not familiar with that exact situation, but I can tell you that the protections that are in the Constitution extend to everyone. It's not this pick and choose, and just because she's in college doesn't mean that the Constitution won't protect her and the Second Amendment doesn't protect her. Now, as far as your question for